Okay, here we go with another project on the vintage Cruiser 19 ERD. Here is the dinette area, and back in the deep reaches of this side of the dinette is a storage compartment. And in order to get to it, one has to start early. You got to take this cushion out. Then you got to take this cushion up, all the while finding a place for them. You would think that's it, but no. Now there's a filler cushion back here because this could be made into a sleeper. So now you got to take this cushion out too and find a place to put it. That gets you down to the plywood. Now you can pick this thing up and that opens up easily accessible storage. Mostly what we put in here is things we will never use. So once it's emptied, you can see this is actually several cubic feet of some very good storage space. The plan is to cut a hole in this wall to the outside and install a compartment door, making this accessible from the exterior of the coach. We'll see how that goes. So the target area for this compartment door is going to be right here on the exterior. I'm going to kind of use that marker light as a landmark inside and out. I took some measurements and found that this compartment door, also on the same side of the coach, only up at the front, is going to be the perfect size to fit in there. So I was able to get a hold of Gulfstream, sent them the VIN number of my trailer and also a picture of a tag on the inside, and they sent me the exact same door, which is also keyed to match the other two compartment doors. Did a little research on YouTube and I did find where a guy had done this on the side of a trailer, and he suggested two things: cutting a template, which I did the other day, and starting from the inside. So we'll see how that goes. So here's a little pointer. Anytime you have a piece of trim like this here, usually on an RV or a travel trailer, that is where the floor is. That's your floor level. So we can kind of use that as a reference. This front one is 1.5 inches up off of that floor. So I'm going to measure about the same. I'm going to measure the same distance here. Starters, I'm going to measure up 1.5 inches and set this one in there, the same position. I'll also use this marker light as a reference on the inside. We'll see how we're looking in there. Here's the template holding that in place, so I can kind of get an idea of where I'm going to be compared to that marker light once I get on the inside. So I've scribed a line there, 1.5 inches up off the floor. This panel is some high-tech cabinetry that hides and protects the wiring for that marker light, tail light, and the license plate light. So we're going to get that out of there, get it out of the way. So here's one reason that we use a template. Now that I got this set in here, I'm seeing that this may have to go back in order to clear this bulkhead. May have to go back a little bit farther than I anticipated. It's going to be up about here where that line is. But now we got to go around and see what that looks like on the outside, because we're right back almost flush with that marker light. So we can come out here now again with this template. I'll put it right there on the line. There we go. And bring it back a little bit here. We're going to be pretty much in line with that marker light. Still looks like there's no major obstructions on the outside. So that's about where it's going to have to be. Okay, so I think I've pretty much figured out where I want my template. I have that stuck to the wall with some putty tape, and I'm going to mark around it, maybe take a couple more measurements just to make sure everything is true and square, and that's where I want it to be. The nice thing about starting on the inside is if you mess up, nobody's really going to see it. So, something else I've discovered, you can see where these holes go through this coach. It's basically a structure of an outer fiberglass skin, this inner paneling covering, and then styrofoam in between. We're ready to go in with power tools. Got this little saw here that I borrowed from a buddy of mine. And before we do that, we're going to use a hole saw on the drill, and we're going to put a hole at each corner of where we marked around the template. Since I want the edge of this cut to be right at the edge of the template, I'm going to measure, and it looks like from the center of that drill to the outside is about 7/8 of an inch. So I'm going to mark in 7/8 of an inch for a starting point. And since crawling down in this hole is not the easiest thing in the world for a 65-year-old man, I'm going to use a compass like this, set it at 7/8 of an inch. Mark it like that. So here's why we start on the inside. Doing these hole saw cuts, the two bottom holes sounded like they hit one of the aluminum stringers. Not really a stud because it doesn't run up and down, but it runs crossways. So now looks like we're going to move the whole thing up a 1/2 inch or so. I made a new cut right above the old cuts, and it was nothing but styrofoam. So we're going to move the whole thing up just a little bit and should be good. I don't want to come up too far because I do have this marker light to contend with on the outside. So I might actually come up and over to the right just a little bit. This drill bit in the center of this hole saw is not long enough that it has pierced the exterior skin yet. So we're all good. We can do some experimentation on the inside here before we make any drastic moves that go through the outside of the camper. So now that we've determined that we're going to raise it up and to the right just a little bit, cut new holes, and we're going to use a regular drill bit, go right on through the exterior. Then we can use these holes as pilot holes to cut through from the outside. We are now committed. So I've made my cuts all the way around on the inside. Since this construction is bonded together, now we're going to use the template to mark the outside and come in from that direction. So using those pilot holes, I positioned the template on the outside and marked around it. As you can see, this is where I was concerned about interference with that marker light. Not a big issue. We may have to modify the frame of the door just a little bit for clearance, but not a problem. So here we are. Since this is going to be on the exterior and highly visible, what I'm actually going to do is cut just a little bit on the inside of that line. If we have to file it out a little bit to make the frame fit, we will, but it's easier to adjust it bigger than it is to adjust it smaller. Again, this is the saw I used on the inside. Makes pretty quick work of this. That went rather quickly. So we have the inner skin cut, the outer skin cut. Only thing holding this together now is the styrofoam, so we're just going to have to do a little bit of prying and popping and maybe tapping with a rubber mallet, see if we can get it to bust loose. A couple of whacks with a rubber mallet and we have an opening. Now we can see there's a couple of screws that were coming up. That's what my saw hit the first time. So that's why I moved it up. Those could have easily been cut off, I guess, but we're committed now to where the opening is, so we'll go with that. Still might have to file those down just a little bit. But now we can get the door here and see how close we are to fitting. So with a sander, grinder, had to use a grinder to grind that one little screw head down that was sticking up there. Getting pretty close. Got it to where, you know, it's just needing a little more coaxing. So what I'm gonna do is hold the door up here and I'm just gonna mark around it with this Sharpie to see exactly where I still need to do a little sanding. But it's getting pretty close. So we are just about there after some sanding and grinding and tweaking, getting it straight. Now here's what I was talking about, the interference with that marker light. I'm just gonna have to notch that frame just a little bit to clear, but that should not be a problem. So I think we're good on the gaps and the fit. Notched out for this marker light. I'm going to take it to the workbench in the garage and finish that up with a file just to make it a little cleaner, but that's going to fit in there just fine. Again, final fit and finish. Cleaned up this trim piece to go around the marker light. I've not secured it to the frame yet. I'm just waiting to make sure. I wanted to make sure everything, I still had some of the inner we had to grind away to make it fit. That's why I say the inside doesn't matter what it looks like. It's not pretty. But from the outside, looks like we're all good. Gaps are all good. There's not really any framing to fasten this to other than on this left side right here. So what I'm going to do is make a little plate to hold it there at least with one screw. The rest of it will be siliconed in, and we hope that holds. Stuck everything in there with silicone. I've got it clamped now. We'll let that silicone set up. Also installed the magnet catch, just like on the other compartments. So once the silicone sets up, then I'm going to install one little screw plate inside just to physically attach it to some kind of a bulkhead, but I don't think it's going to be needed. But I'll do it anyway. Okay, it's the next day. I've let the silicone set up overnight. As you can see, I got a little bit to trim off around there, but wanted to make sure we had enough. Get this all cleaned up with a knife, a shop knife, get that straightened up. Like I mentioned before, I put one little screw plate in here just to physically attach it. I don't think it's going to need it. It's in there pretty darn solid. And other than trimming off a little excess silicone, I'm going to call this project done.